Hello and welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight with Lee Ellery, the disability show here on Swan TV, where I will be talking to a variety of guests about how their disability affects them day to day, or in today's case, how disability and archaeology is affecting people with disabilities in everyday life. With me to discuss this is Sarahjayne, who is actually studying disability and archaeology in the University of Leeds, I believe. Hertfordshire, I had it wrong. But yeah, so could you tell me a bit about first how you got into disability activism in general, and then how you've come to study disability and archaeology?
Yeah, so my conditions worsened, and at that time I was working as an archaeologist. But at the same time, I was also thought it wasn't fair that people with ME weren't getting COVID vaccinations, and that's what really spurred me off with sort of activism. So I did take that as far as the Senate, but it didn't get passed, but I was pleased to have got that far. And that's what started me off, really. And I joined the Enabled Archaeology Foundation as a volunteer. And then the opportunity came up to do a doctorate then, and I decided to look at disability inclusion in archaeology with a focus on chronic illness and the workplace.
It all sounded interesting to me until we were talking before the show. I had no idea that there was even a degree that looked at it. So since you've been studying it, how have you found it so far?
Brilliant. I've had, so it's a professional doctorate, so I do a mix of essays, and I'll do probably a toolkit as well as my final dissertation. And it's been brilliant. I've had the opportunity to talk at conferences in America. I'll be going to Belfast. So I've just had some brilliant opportunities along the way.
Do you think your opportunities may spread to other people, maybe doing it in the future?
I think that it's definitely brought the topic to the forefront, and there's a lot of interest in equality, diversity and inclusion in archaeology and heritage now.
You said that you've had influence with the Assembly and politicians in Cardiff. How have they taken to it? Yeah, people were really helpful, and I was pleased that it got that far, as it was very frustrating that people with ME didn't seem to be treated fairly, and I think chronic illnesses are overlooked sometimes, especially within archaeology as well. So that's something I feel really passionate about, trying to change things for people with chronic illness, especially in the workforce. I think I've been a disability activist myself. I see that as well, and I think it's got to be people like myself and you and other people that I know. We need to be out there spreading the word. So if there was anything that you could say to politicians to really hammer home the message, do you have anything to say to that?
Personally, I'd like to see more focus on sort of flexible working opportunities and improvement in wages in the archaeological and heritage sector. I think that is a big issue, and with the cost of living being higher for disabled people anyway, and with the low pay in archaeology, it is difficult.
I really think more needs to be done as well, but do you have any idea of if there was something that you would like to change in policy, maybe what would that be?
There's lots of things that I would like to change in archaeology. As I say, I think my number one thing, if I could change anything, would be to have more part-time opportunities in higher level roles. I think that's one of the main issues for disabled people, along with a requirement often for driving licences as well, which can be a really big issue for people. So they're probably two of the most important things, I would say.
I think getting people into work, as you say, one of the important things for me as an activist is to be able to have PA support in work. So is that something you would like to see as part of your ask as well?
I think that, yeah, definitely. I think it would help a lot of people. I also see that a lot from students wanting PA support, whether it's recently I've seen that in lab settings, people looking for reasonable adjustments. Yeah, I definitely think it would be very helpful for a lot of people.
And you touched on reasonable adjustment there. So during your doctorate, has there been any reasonable adjustments that you've needed, and how has that request gone down with your lecturers?
Yeah, so because I received funding from Student Finance, I have had an assessment with them. So I had a sit-stand desk and an ergonomic chair and some technology as well. I haven't really needed any adjustments in terms of from my lecturers, and because it is a distance course, that made it really flexible for me and accessible. Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do it. So.
Well, thank you for taking the time today to come and talk to me about it. So in closing then, if people wanted to find out more about the course and how they can join maybe, how would they go about doing that?
So the course I'm doing is a D-Heritage course at the University of Hertfordshire. But if people want to get in touch with me about my work in archaeology, they can look at my academia profile, or through the Enabled Archaeology Foundation is probably the best place.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, that's it for this episode of In the Spotlight with Lee Ellery. Don't forget that you can find out more about future guests on the In the Spotlight Facebook page and obviously Swan TV's. My guest today is Louise Bretland-Treharne. Louise has a disability called Ataxia, and she tends to write poetry in ways of coping with a disability and how she copes with it. So I'm going to talk to her now a bit about that and some other stuff alongside it. So welcome to the show, Louise.
Thank you, Lee.
How does your disability affect you in general, first of all?
Right, in general, I have a condition called ataxia and other conditions like vertigo, migraine, but it also affects some aspects of my cognition. So short-term working memory, I have no sense of working time. For example, if someone asked me, has 10 minutes gone by or an hour, I would have no sense. And it's a balance problem with the brain, because it's a small hindbrain that tends to be affected. So I see an ataxia clinic in London as well as services in Wales. So basically with my ataxia, I have a rollator walker to walk with. I furniture walk in the house. So it's like walking on a tightrope without falling over. And that's a description,
imagine, yeah.
my neuro physio gave me, so I don't complicate with clinical things, being trained neuronurse.
So obviously you've got ways of coping with it daily.
Yes.
Can you sort of give me an example of how you might, if you came up to an obstacle, how you would cope with it?
Right. The obstacles quite often is things like there is no accessible disabled toilet, so I research before I go to places if I'm not familiar. Often it's a problem with cars parked on pavements or broken lifts, or people not able to grasp, because most of my disabilities with my changed brain is cognitive. It's invisible. Yeah. And the cognitive fatigue with my movements, it gets very tiring. And things are very unpredictable with ataxia. I can go from being quite well to being unwell. So within all of that, I have personal assistants, carers to support me, because quite often other people around won't realise what the struggles are. So the way I cope, because I was a neuroscience trained nurse up until 1990, I have a lot of insight. So the way I cope is using the arts to express a frustration, address the cognitive impairments, because I'm known, hopefully affectionately, as Mrs. No Full Stops Given. But some improvements, so I've had to adapt my writing to poetic form, because for me to write longer stories and prose, the memory doesn't accommodate, so I've adjusted through poetry.
I was going to come on to that. You've recently started writing poetry with some groups down here at the Elysium. So can you give us an example of one of the poems you've written, particularly related to ataxia?
I can, but the good news is, since this was written, I have recorded my own song, helped by a project at People Speak Up in Llanelli, and it's on YouTube, funded by Arts Cymru, Council Cymru. So this one talks about the journey with ataxia, with progress and adapting since written. No fixed abode, the atlas guiding my brain, the atlas guiding my brain, says no to singing. Ataxia, the thief, sobs of hiraeth, longing, knowing singing day's over, needing to cry here and there, but not in stuck ways, singing my soul medicine. Soul smiles knowingly as spoken voice, still truly nourishing. Acceptance created with willingness. Timing has no clock reality. Daringly seeking new ways. This not easy, but remains a choice. Cleansing, healing tears, thank you. Inviting in more and more with gratitude, the welcoming of my spoken voice, a journey of trust with no promises, life geared by choices, owns the version of what was, is, or to be. Ego respected, but asked to step back. My voice can speak with courage, with good humour and laughter. Letting go, not easy, but gained enough wisdom to grasp this needs investment. Otherwise, ego crushes further my soul. Speaking up has a louder voice than my ego. Respecting accepting ego's role, but told firmly its place, being the backing vocalist.
Well, that just says it all to me. It's really powerful, and it really speaks volumes. So since you've been writing poetry, do you feel that your word in regards to ataxia has made a difference for people looking in?
Absolutely, because I use my creative self with the clinical, both holding hands, working together. So with the ataxia, when you start seeing glazed eyes, it's a good hint people are losing interest. And I thought, okay, how can I talk differently about disabilities, like ataxia is one of them, that appeals to an audience for the right reasons, so they feel invited into listening for the right reasons of wanting to know, and actually being able to offer the message, I've got something to offer too. Two ways, collaborative work.
Well, thank you, Louise. It's been a delight to talk to you, and I'm sure we won't be seeing the last of you down here at Elysium, I'm sure. And I know myself that being a regular here now through doing in the Spotlight with Lee Ellery, I will be coming to one of your poetry events in the future to hear more.
Thank you very much.
So that's all for today, everyone. And I will see you on the next edition of In the Spotlight with Lee Ellery.